Hello? Test? Yeah. Okay, ready to go? Time starts now, right? Okay, so good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming today. We're here to talk about peace and demilitarization and climate justice and the connections between these issues. We have a lineup of speakers. We have 6 panelists. We're going to go through them. All the panelists will be available for interview, so if you would like to have an interview or ask questions, then please approach us after this press conference if we don't have time at the end. So we're going to be looking at different aspects of militarization, its connection with the climate crisis, and how this relates to climate justice. So without further ado, I'll just say my name is Karen Hallows. I work for Peace Boat, and I'm part of the Peace and Demilitarization Working Group, which is a cross-constituency working group hosted within the Women and Gender constituency. And that's enough from me. And I would like to start off talking about why militarism is such an important topic when talking about climate justice by handing to our first speaker, Ellie Kinney of CEOPS. Ellie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Karen. Just to check, can everyone hear me okay? Brilliant, perfect. In the NCQG negotiations, there is talk of how we mobilize funds from high polluting sectors. The sectors included in this conversation are shipping and aviation. The emissions from global militaries are more than these 2 sectors combined. We estimate that militaries are responsible for 5.5% of global emissions. This means if the world's militaries combined were a country, they would be the 4th largest emitter. And yet, militaries are missing from the spotlight here, and that's because reporting of military emissions to the UNFCCC is only voluntary. No country is obliged to report the emissions from their militaries to the UNFCCC, and so many do not. And because of this, they're also not held to the same reduction commitments. They set their own benchmarks, and this is simply unacceptable for such a high polluting sector. And because militaries are not obliged to report their emissions, this estimate of 5.5% is purely that, it's an estimate. Because we simply don't know the true scale of the military's contribution to the climate crisis. To add to this, 5.5% doesn't include the impact of conflicts. This is the emissions from peacetime. Researchers who've estimated the climate impacts of Russia's invasion of Ukraine estimate that the first 2 years of the invasion have resulted in the emissions that a country the size of the Netherlands would produce over a year, which is about the same as 90 million petrol cars on the road. Similarly, research that's been done looking at the climate impacts of the destruction and the necessary rebuilding of Gaza suggests that the destruction and rebuilding will release more emissions than 135 countries emit in a year. And yet there is no internationally agreed framework for measuring conflict emissions and for factoring these into the UNFCCC. Therefore, we have no idea how much wars are setting back climate action within the UNFCCC. And furthermore, this leads to no accountability. Now, this has to change. At this stage of the climate crisis, no sector can be exempt from climate action, and definitely not one as polluting as the military. This is 5.5% of global emissions. Now, there are clear actions that we can take at COP to deal with this. We need transparent military emissions reporting that is robust, that is thorough, that is transparent and comparable from country to country. We need reduction targets which are in line with the Paris Agreement if we are to keep 1.5 alive. And we need an internationally agreed framework for reporting conflict emissions, both to know where we stand in terms of climate action, but also as a route for accountability for countries affected by conflict. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellie. I'd like to now move on to our next speaker, Deborah Burton from Tipping Point North South, to talk about military spending and its relationship to the climate crisis and our search for climate justice. Are you on?
That's it, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Karen. So yeah, military spending. The issue of public military spending as a source to tap for public climate finance is very new in this space. But that is changing. It's a good thing that it's changing, because when we talk about shifting from billions to trillions, and when we hear the overdeveloped world saying it has no new money, military spending holds a very useful mirror up to this discussion. And as always, the numbers tell the story. You've heard it on the emissions there from Ellie. So global military spending has reached a record high of 2.24 trillion annually. It has increased by over 20% in the past 10 years. It continues to increase, and incomprehensibly, in the face of breaching 1.5 degrees of warming, we are now in a new arms race. If the current trend continues between 2024 and 2030, we can expect to see more than $17 trillion spent on the global military. And around 55% of these trillions will be spent by Annex II countries, rich countries, on their own militaries. All of this as we witness the unspeakable refusal of rich nations to step up and meet their moral and historic responsibility on climate finance. With Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and dozens more ongoing conflicts, we must not forget the other half of the public military spending equation, and it is the arms industry polluters and profiteers who are in receipt of much of public military spending billions. The top 100 arms companies account for just under $600 billion in arms sales in 2021, and that is before Gaza and Ukraine. The top 20 arms companies account for 2/3 of total arms sales, and they come from a handful of countries: US, China, Russia, UK, France, and Italy. Since Ukraine and Gaza, their profits are soaring, and their order books are totally backlogged. And while arms profiteering soars, ever-increasing military spending does not deliver peace. Between 2010 and 2022, conflicts have doubled. 2023 saw the highest number of conflicts since World War II. Conflict drives 80% of humanitarian needs. So what do we need from a real COP of peace? The climate emergency must not be a pretext for the military to reinvent itself as a climate savior. Its emissions, you've heard it, its emissions are a big part of the problem at 5.5%. Its ever-rising military budgets are part of the problem. On military spending, we want COP29 to include redirected public military spending into the new goal. On NDCs, we want concrete plans for developed countries to reduce their military spending in order to invest in climate action in their NDCs. And as per the recent proposal at Bonn this year, we need the Arab Group G77 plus China plan to include the arms industry as part of a wider rich country sales tax, FTT fashion technology. They included the arms trade critically. Big step. We need that to remain on the table. In short, the civil society call for the 5 trillion public climate finance number is reasonable. The recent oil change international research has shown where that 5 trillion can come from, and it includes redirecting 20% of public military spending into that pot. That can absolutely be achieved. We need Annex II states to be willing to divest from increasing military budgets, invest in climate change mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and financing for just transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. So a reallocation, a divestment from war, and an investment in climate justice is what we're calling for. And fossil fuels are fueling war. There's a connection between militarism and the fossil fuel industry, I'd like to welcome now our next speaker, Hamza, to talk more about the relationship between the fossil fuels and conflict.
Thank you. Do you hear me well? Okay, we've heard from the previous speakers that the intersections between the climate crisis and war and militarism are under-scrutinized and under-analyzed. But thanks to all the research and the work that they've been doing, it has become clearer by the day that the climate crisis and war are really intersected. And there is no clearer example than the case of Palestine with the genocide that is being committed today in Gaza. That example, that case study, unfortunately, is deadly and full of massacres. Clear fossil fuels fuel genocide, fuel wars, fuel an ecocide. In the case of Israel, the coal that Israel imports, it is being used to generate electricity that is being used for infrastructure, for illegal colonial settlements, but also for the AI murderous infrastructure that is being used today to kill Palestinian children, men, and women. But also the fuel that comes to Israel from abroad, from other countries, is being used to fuel the Israeli genocidal war machine, from tanks to planes and to other infrastructure. This clearly needs to stop. And globally, we need to campaign for a global embargo on Israel in order to stop that genocide. Those efforts have been taking place in the last few months, and they managed to convince the Colombian government to stop exporting coal to Israel. Colombia was the first exporter of coal to Israel before it stops it now. That work needs to continue to convince other countries who speak words but they do not take actions. We need concrete actions. Words, mere words, do not mean a lot for the children of Gaza and in fact for the women and men of Palestine that are being slaughtered by the day. And in here, the global embargo for Palestine is targeting 3 countries, Turkey, Brazil, and South Africa, to stop the coal exports to Israel, also stop the fuel exports that go through Turkey. I think we need to clearly say there will be no climate justice without the liberation of Palestine. There will be no climate justice on occupied land, and it's really important to take concrete action to isolate the genocidal settler colonial state of Israel in its pursuit of massacring and slaughtering the Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamza. We've heard about the case of Palestine. I'd like now to turn to our next speaker, Tasneem, to talk about the situation and how that relates to the climate crisis and militarism in Sudan.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I'm Tasneem from Sudan. Last April 2023, me and my family, we left our home in Khartoum, the capital, due to the start of the war. At that time, we said it's better to take advantage of the ceasefire, but only ceasefire until now. It was done to evacuate UN staff and diplomats from Khartoum. Since that time, we left our home. We were not the only one. The conflict has been expanded to our area, and more than 8 million Sudanese now they displaced from their homes. According to a study published last week by London School of Economics, more than 60,000 Sudanese lost their life in only Khartoum, not Darfur, not other region of the country. You may not hear about this. It's because our war is just got forgotten. No one speaks about it. It's not in the media. It's not anywhere. And amid we are suffering from the result of this war, we still face climate change impacts. last year and this year, we faced unprecedented rainfall that led to the flooding of and destroying of more than 50,000. Another 200,000 Sudanese got displaced because of the floodings. Some of them already was displaced because of the war. And also as a result of this rainfall, this year, last August, there was like a dam, Arbaat Dam, got collapsed in Red Sea State. This dam represent 30% of the water supply for Port Sudan city. As we are suffering from climate change impacts, from war impacts, and humanitarian crisis in the country, all the funds that respond to climate change was stopped due to the war. We are now here in the COP. We demand that climate finance to be sensitive for climate-affected countries that also suffer from war and fragile states. Also the war, I work as a researcher. We are studying the environmental impact of the war with CEOPS. The war has devastating impact on the environment. A lot of infrastructure, water infrastructure and roads and factories got damaged. Our wars got forgotten, left behind. In similar crisis, the international community stepped out and helped, but in our case, we are just excluded from it. Not only even humanitarian, not only climate crisis, but even like our scholarship, stuff like this, we are all got excluded. Last year I had a scholarship, and when they said me like, you are not accepted anymore just because you have a war in your country. I think this is just not acceptable, and I'm here demanding, like you talk about Sudan, we need our support. We need to speak more about it, about the situation there, and advocate for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tasneem. And militarism and war are especially impacting women, indigenous communities, and people are most affected by the climate crisis. Even today, especially indigenous people are suffering from the effects of nuclear weapons. And I'd like now, and testing on their lands. I'd now like to welcome now our next speaker, Karina Lester, to talk about this issue.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Karina Lester. I'm a Yankunytjatjara woman from the Western Desert region in Australia, in South Australia. I'm also a second-generation survivor of British nuclear tests that took place in our country in the 1950s and then through to the 1960s. But I'm also an ICANN ambassador, and it was really important for me to share this story of the harms felt by Aboriginal people in Australia, the nuclear injustice that was done to Aboriginal people. Many had passed, many suffered, and many still continue to suffer. These tests were tests conducted by the British government, an agreement by the Australian government to come and test on what they saw was open land. But actually, Aboriginal people and Arnawajura lived on those traditional lands, practicing their traditional cultures and their ways of living in that region. Many people still suffer today, and if this is to be the COP peace gathering in Baku this year, we need to focusing on peace and making sure that we are seeing more investment into those spaces. Peace for Arnawal, for Aboriginal people, but also for the wider communities as well across Australia, because we often are felt or imposed with this industry of many pressures from nuclear, whether it's mining on our traditional lands, whether it's waste dump issues on our traditional lands, whether it's nuclear power on our traditional lands. We seem to be forgetting about the past and not learning from the past, and the past that is a very dark secret of what happened in Australia. Some work as ICANN has over the many years in talking up around nuclear and the climate Many First Nations peoples are very concerned because our traditional lands are scarred, and we're the scars of what happened in 1950 through to 1960s. For decades, people have been testing. Those scars are still evident, and you see that on our traditional lands. You also see the scars on people, on First Nations peoples in our country of Australia. ICANN has done some work in this space around nuclear weapon and our climate. It's really important for people to know about this report and the work that has been done with ICANN, because the two do not go together, as we know that that is chaos. They don't work together, of course. They are two massive existential threats, and each makes the other worse. And they are real concerns for all Indigenous peoples and for all of us in this planet. We have one. We need to do more in focusing on the health and well-being of this planet, the health and well-being of our people, all of us that are in this room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina. So militarism is not making us safer. It's not an answer to the climate crisis. It's driving the climate crisis. So we're talking about the need to demilitarize in order to find climate justice. Also, demilitarize to make a safer world. Having more increased weapons does not answer the bring the solution to the climate crisis. It does not make us safer. So what would make us safer? What is an alternative to a human security? If we don't rely on nuclear weapons, on conventional weapons, on these weapons of weapons and militarism, then how could we have an alternative? I'd like to now welcome our next speaker, Yoshioka Tatsuya, who is the chair of the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, which is a network of NGOs working on peace building, an alternative. Yoshioka.
Thank you, Karen. I really would like to share with you, as a peace board and also that the GPAC, the representative, and also member of the ICANN, it is a really time to abolish the nuclear weapon. I'm really seriously think so. One of the reasons is who can deny that the Israeli government will use that nuclear weapon, not to use nuclear weapon in Gaza. I really remember when I heard first time from the Hiroshima Nagasaki survivors, they said they cannot imagine about such kind of weapon human beings can use to the human beings. I think now we have to really seriously face to this reality in Gaza, and at the same time that the situation of the nuclear weapon. Not only Gaza, Ukraine also has a possibility. We have to really, reality of the nuclear weapon, we have to know. I really remember this time is a thankfully Nobel Peace Committee that decided to give the Nobel Peace Prize to the Hiroshima Nagasaki survivors. It was a great decision. And at that time, one of the representatives of the Hibakusha said, I'm remembering, this is in his speech, I'm remembering what's happening in Hiroshima during I'm watching the TV, what's going on Gaza and the bloody children, baby. Same things happen in Hiroshima. And he said thousands of the children and babies dying in front of him. I think now we should not repeat. And it is so clear situation. That's why it is a very good opportunity the Nobel Peace Prize gave to the Hiroshima Nagasaki survivors. And I think I really would like to create a solidarity with the people in Gaza, and together with them, and we really would like to abolish a nuclear weapon and stop the military action, stop the killing Gaza, That is our people who reading the peace and the sustainable world, I think. Without the peace, never happen sustainable world. Without the sustainability, no peace. Let's work together. Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to the end of our speakers. If you would like to ask an interview or questions, all are available, not in this room, but we can meet outside and can be contacted. All the information is on the press release, contact information. If you're not able to speak now, then you can reach out to any of us and we can put in touch. So thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you very much for attending today.